Dame Diana Rigg is one of the few actresses to have achieved equal recognition in classical theatre and mainstream TV and movies. Acclaimed in the former for the miracle of her voice in plays including Medea and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and in the latter for the miracle of her body as Emma Peel in The Avengers and as 007's love interest in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Throughout her career, she's alternated high-profile theatre, plays by Tom Stoppard, musicals by Stephen Sondheim, with standout TV, including a BAFTA award-winning role in the domestic drama Mother Love.
If we look at other actresses of the same rank, Dame Judi Dench, Dame Vanessa Redgrave, Dame Maggie Smith, they've all published an autobiography and/or an authorised biography, and we don't have either from you. Is that deliberate policy?
Yes. I had a book sent to me at the theatre recently. It's supposed to be my biography, and I read it with interest, as you can imagine. I had nothing to do with it at all. And I think I'll stay that way, silent to the grave.
And the reason you haven't written your memoirs, where so many of your colleagues have, it is, Paul Schofield, Alec Guinness said in the past that the public should not know too much about an actor. It should be what's there on stage.
That is what I believe, but also it's to do with me as a person. I've always hated prurience and curiosity about other people. I don't actually have that. And so I refuse to play to that in other people.
So that's very interesting, but also very unusual. So when it's all, who's this who's got the super injunction and who's that who's supposed to be going out with so-and-so, you really don't ever get involved in any of those games?
Well, I got involved with the Daily Mail when they put words into my mouth and retired me because it was so patently untrue. And it was a question of honour as well, that I'd kept my mouth shut about my broken marriage and never talked to any member of the press about it. And suddenly these words were put in my mouth. So yes, then I did sue them, and they came out with their hands up in the end.
You were once quoted as saying, "I could have gone on to do greater things, but I didn't." Was that an accurate quote?
Golly, what was that apropos of?
It was, you were reflecting on your career, I think, about 15, 20 years ago.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Yes, I think I was probably talking about the parts. And I was obviously mourning the fact that they hadn't come my way. But now, looking back, they did come my way. So I've got no gripes at all in that direction.
But you've had an interestingly mixed career. You could, at the beginning, have gone directly down the classical route and played all of those Shakespearean roles, but you've been able to do a huge variety. I was
very lucky and also very ignorant because I had absolutely no idea when I went into and got the Avengers what an impact it would have on my life. I hadn't seen much television. I'd only ever seen television with my parents. So when I took the job, it was a leap in the dark. And I was criticised for it by people like Peter Hall, who said she's wasting herself and all that kind of stuff.
He'd been your director of the RSC, yeah.
But in actual fact, it worked out wonderfully well.
Victorian?
I hardly think they'd be amused.
No, perhaps not. And women then, well, they lacked your independence.
I'm thoroughly emancipated.
Does Elizabethan appeal to you?
Not at all. The men were so tiny.
The first thing I did when I stopped doing the Avengers was to go back to the Royal Shakespeare and say, thank you, now I can sell tickets, which I couldn't before. And it was my way of acknowledging where I had been nurtured.
And that question of that range, because people will mention the Avengers and On Her Majesty's Secret Service, do you regret the shadow of those roles?
No, at all. I have to acknowledge what I owe them. And I do acknowledge it. You know, when I leave the theatre now, around the stage door, and, you know, we're surrounded by people wanting, and 9 times out of 10, it's a photograph of the Avengers or it's a photograph of the Bond film. And I acknowledge my debt to those, the film and the series. It allowed me to do all sorts of other things.
And as you know, there are some actresses who later on in their careers, as they've got older, retrospectively, they've had feminist concerns about some of the roles they played earlier and some of the things they did and some of the publicity and the legs and the breasts and so on. But have you ever felt concern about the Avengers?
Absolutely not. I mean, the feminists actually approached me in the 60s, to be one of their spokeswomen. And it always seemed to me that the issue is quite simple. Within yourself, you are an individual and you are free. You are a free individual. The only fetters that the feminists have are the economic fetters. And once we have parity with men, which we do in my profession, I've got no gripe at all. And economic independence is what they were about without actually recognizing it. They went on to kind of, chop the cojones off men, which is utterly ridiculous.
But the other area that they went into, as you know, is this word objectification, the idea of being a sex object for men. I mean, Emma Peel, I suppose some would say that was, but you never worried about that.
I have to be honest, it discomforted me because I never saw myself as sexy. There you go. So I wasn't entirely happy, but I didn't see it as a feminist issue. I saw it as a, if you like, a kind of, I think perhaps I fell short in that respect because I couldn't deliver. I did the sexy photographs because it was asked of me, but I never did the sexy in person, ever, ever, ever.
Have you ever worried over the years, because there are many stories of actresses getting quite worrying mail from men, I mean, creepy or worse than that. Have you had that?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I did, along with a lot of other ladies, mature ladies. And it turned out to be some pathetic creature in Manchester who's, I don't know, some bachelor or something. And he used to send really filthy things to me. And I think Nairi Dawn Porter, various other people suffered. But I could always tell because he had this weird habit of circling, the dot above an eye, and he'd circle it. So that was spooky. And as soon as I saw that, I stopped opening them.
Well, you had the great advantage of having some eyes in your name. I suppose actresses who didn't, they wouldn't have been able to work it out the same way. I mean, two eyes would be very useful. But in general, fans have been, I mean, they've stayed within the right limits.
Oh, absolutely. I have no stalking problems. Now I don't. When I was doing Phaedra at the National, and this Dutchman who had a thing about me bought tickets for 6 nights in a row to see Phaedra. He didn't speak a word of English, and he decided that the play was a comedy. He sat there laughing throughout. And of course, it was very upsetting because there was I trying to be dead serious and tragedian and all that. And eventually they had to kick him out and pay him back his money. But that was a fan gone wrong.
That's amazing. So you were playing one of the great tragedies of all time to a single laughing Dutchman. No Turn Unstoned, of which you also know in the book, which was a collection of the worst reviews ever given, after one you received from John Simon, the critic who wrote about you in Abelard and Helwars. Did he compare you to a brick mausoleum or to a basilica? Because some people say it was a brick basilica.
Oh, I probably got it wrong. Doesn't matter. But insufficient flying buttresses was the point.
And you turned it into a very entertaining and very successful book, which has given, I think, a lot of performers who've been reviewed a lot of pleasure. But and
I do hope courage, because it's always been decided by other people that the reason I wrote the book was to get back at the critics. No, no, no. The reason I wrote the book was to show that everybody, no matter how famous and legendary, has had a bad notice. So courage to the young, because it'll happen to you one of these days, but you can rise above it and you can live beyond it and you can have success beyond it as well.
But there is something which is part of the, I think, genuine bravery of acting, that whereas if you get a bad review for a film or a TV performance, you're somewhere else and it can hurt you, but it can't affect you on in the performance. On stage, you have to go on night after night, knowing of these reviews. Did you just read it yourself, that John Simon review, or did somebody bring it to your attention? No.
No. I did, yeah. Oh, that was awful.
You just opened a newspaper and then...
Ah! Yeah, and you sort of duck into doorways on the way to the theatre. Cross your arms across your insufficient flying buttresses.
And did other people comment on it in the cast?
No, they're charming, people. When you've been swinged, as 'twere, by a critic, nobody mentions anything. Their eyes sort of slide away, so you know they've read it.
And when you had to then go on and do that nude scene again with your... as a brick mausoleum or basilica with your insufficient flying buttresses. Did it... that must have been difficult to do the scene.
Well, you've just got to do it. You've got to do it. In fact, I did a play and we got the most terrible notices, rightly so. It wasn't a good play. And I remember one night right up in the gods, some man had paid God, not very much because he was in the gods, but he really resented what he'd paid. And he shouted down, this play is a load of shit. And I felt like saying, yeah, I do agree, but I'm sorry, and I'll pay you back, or whatever. Anyway, we just lasted a week. But it is the odd word which can really hurt. And some critics will attack your physicality. I don't think that's fair, but that's what really hurts.
You've spoken in the past, I don't know if you still hold to this, about the therapeutic effects of cigarettes and red wine, which is against official government and NHS advice. But do you still...
I don't smoke now.
You've given up?
I've given up, yes. And the red wine, I fully appreciate. Every doctor will say, have some red wine. It's very good for you.
But you said in an interview that you drink a bottle a night to go to sleep.
No, I didn't. She got it wrong. It was a glass. It was a glass.
So let's hope not too many people followed the advice.
God, I wouldn't be here.
In that article. It seemed to me quite heroic if you were drinking a bottle every night. Yeah.
Everybody teased me about that.
So it's one glass of red wine to help you sleep.
Yeah, very good.
And why did you stop smoking?
Because it affected me, and I had to. I absolutely had to. I'm 73, and I'd had a good spell of thoroughly enjoying cigarettes, but I had to.
And it never seemed in all those years to affect your voice. But it didn't?
No. It's interesting, it really didn't. I mean, I did musicals, and it didn't.
Was that a leap, or had you always been aware that you could sing?
I've always had this idea that if you're an actor, you should actually be able to do anything. And I've always wanted to do everything. I don't want to do mime particularly. I don't want to do anything in a mask. But I did want to sing and dance. I don't think people realise, and I am not a professional singer, I don't think people realise how tough musicals are. They are the toughest form of entertainment on the actors and actresses that do them.
You're the top. You're the Colosseum. You're the top. You're the Louvre Museum. You're the nimble tread of the feet of Fred Astaire. You're the National Gallery, your Barlow salary, your Camembert.
Talking about your childhood, the two major influences were Yorkshire and India. You were part of that very particular British social group, the Children of the Raj. The reason for that, your father, he'd gone to India to work.
Yeah. He was an apprentice who'd won a scholarship. And he answered an advertisement in the Times which said only public school boys need apply. And it was a Maharaja, because in those days they had total power over their kingdoms there. And this was Rajputana, now Rajasthan. And I think it was a designer of one of the famous trains. Anyway, my father worked under him. So obviously he got a letter of recommendation. And he came up to London to be interviewed, and he got the job and went out to India and built railways for the Maharaja of Jodhpur and Bikaner. And when I went out with my brother, it was so moving. We pitched up in Bikaner, which is not part of the Golden Triangle, you know, where all the tourists go. Bikaner is sort of slightly off. And there were crowds at the station, and the town band was there. And then a man sang a song in praise of my father, putting bread in the mouths of generations of mothers and children, because he started a train workshop there. And it was so moving to get a glimpse of your father's work and achievement in life. It was wonderful.
And the circumstances of that childhood, so there would have been servants, and you would have had a nanny.
Yes, Aya.
Aya. And you spoke Hindi?
I did, yes. Yeah, yes, I spent a lot of time with the Aya. Parents were at the tennis club. Yes. And then, of course, I was sent back to England to a boarding school, and all Hindi disappeared because I wanted to merge and become part of the new surroundings.
And there are certain qualities associated with Yorkshire people. I can invoke the stereotype because I grew up there, but plain-speaking, hard-working, a dislike of pretension. Did your parents have that?
Yeah, all of it. Yeah, it's very much part of our family ethos, totally.
And it was I'm interested in people who become performers out of this background, because to me, a lot of the northern background was you weren't supposed to show off. They didn't like children showing off. But was that beaten into you?
Oh, God, yes. I mean, I remember when my parents were abroad and I was school holidays, I lived with my granny, who was a tough old Yorkshire broad. I mean, boy, was she tough. And she used to do Sunday supper, which was always kind of tinned salmon and beetroot and, you know, those sad salads that existed in those days. And I remember I used to get the beetroot and put it over my lips, and my granny caught me doing it, and I got an earful about being vain and, you know, stop that immediately. So, you know, that was very Yorkshire. And I think it stands you in good stead afterwards, because you never get too big for your boots. You can't. There's always a voice there saying, who do you think you are?
And the fact that you were at school, first of all, in Buckinghamshire, and then going back to your granny in Yorkshire, so you must have seen very little of your parents at that stage.
Yes, I did. Yes. About 18 months I didn't see my mum. And then she came back, and there was a schism, because I learned to be independent. Of course you do. You know, when I went to see my gran, I'd be put on a train from Buckinghamshire to go to Doncaster with a label here, Universal Aunts. And I'd get off the platform, and then some old spinsterish, joyless person would come and pick me up and walk me around a park and take me to the Cardoma for tea, and then put me on a train for Doncaster.
So Universal Aunts was a kind of guardian service, was it?
They are.
Yeah.
I think they still exist. And it's very much ladies of slender means, and it's very much gentility.
And this kind of upbringing is now not seen as ideal. I mean, it's gone the other way, that it's kind of 24-hour,
I know,
everyday parenting is what people try to do.
Well, I never held it against my mother or father, ever, ever, ever. No, I wasn't brought. I mean, it wasn't part of thinking in those days. It was for our good. We were sent to school back in England.
But do you regret it that you didn't get to know them better?
Well, I did get to know them better later on. I lived with them from 11 onwards. No, I loved them, unquestionably. We had when I was an adolescent, I think I was pretty painful. You know, dying to do other things. I lived really quite a an enclosed life with just between my parents and school. There were no alternatives. There were no youth clubs. There were no discos. There were nothing. Nothing at all, and no clothes for young girls in those days. No denims. We were dressed as mini adults from a very early age.
And the reason you saw more of your parents later on, they came back from India. So your father seems to have been quite a resourceful man, because he had to remake his life several times.
He
and
did.
First in India and then back in.
Yeah, and he had to come back to England and find a job, and at an age when it was difficult. Yeah, he was. He was a wonderful man, really lovely. I adored him.
And then you were sent to another school, which was a Quaker school.
Yes, it was, Moravian.
In Pudsey, as
Pudsey.
they would have said, yeah.
Pudsey Puddingyet.
So why did they choose that school, do you know?
Well, because I couldn't get into Leeds Grammar. There's no way I could pass the test.
The 11 plus?
The 11 plus. Yeah. I'd had this very odd education, convent in India, where I seem to remember they taught me to do up buttons and laces and stuff. I mean, my mother taught me to read. I then came back and went to Miss Poskett's in Doncaster, which was, you know, again, Yorkshire gentility, but not much accent on the education. And then they sat me down in front of a desk to try and get to Leeds Grammar. No way. I mean, I was an intelligent child, but there was nothing. I had no formal education. And so they had to send me to a private school.
Now, this is interesting, because it's commonly said, as you know now, that the problem with the 11 plus was that children who failed it felt a sense of failure. But did you?
Oh, of course. Well, apart from anything else, we were not, we were quite poor in the sense that they wanted to keep up standards that they'd had in India, but not servants, you understand. But yeah, and I was bleeding the family accounts by going to a private school.
But then, to complicate it, you didn't enjoy the Quaker school.
Hated it, yeah. I was very imaginative, and there was very little imagination allowed in that school. It was facts up onto the board, copy them down into your exercise book, go home and learn them, and that was the teaching in those days. Except for one teacher called Mrs. Greenwood, who actually she taught elocution. A lot of, you know, Yorkshire girls had an accent, and she taught them how to speak without an accent. But with me, she didn't have to, so we went into poetry, which I loved.
And so often in the background of someone, there is an inspirational teacher,
Yeah.
but she was to a large degree responsible for you becoming an actress.
So.
Yeah.
Very much so, and I kept in touch with her right up until her death.
And when she was doing poetry with you, was she clear that she was talking about drama and that she was trying to get you into that area?
Yes, she was. Oh. Yeah. She had all the ambition for me. I had no knowledge of theatre at all.
And did you do plays at school?
Yes, we did. Wild Decembers, the story of the Bronte family. Clement's Dane, I think it's called. I played Emily, of course, and coughed through everybody's lines.
Because she was supposed to be, you were dying of consumption.
I was dying of consumption.
Did they tell you to stop coughing?
Yes, of course.
Oh, right, yeah.
And also I remember putting green powder on my face. It was terribly bad.
And at what point did the idea that you might go to drama school, that was put by Miss Greenwood?
Yeah, definitely. And she wrote to RADA. And then, of course, I was accepted. And then we had to find the money. And my dad didn't have the money, so Mrs. Greenwood then wrote to the city council. And I had to go and be interviewed by this board of men at the far end of a room, very long walk towards them. And you know, questions like, well, lass, what makes you think you'll be an actress? You know, sort of kind of like, anyway, I must have said the right thing because they gave me a scholarship, and thank God they did. I mean, I owe a great deal to that old Leeds City Council. Fat chance of anybody getting one nowadays.
Having got to RADA, you were not one of the stars of the year because
way.
you didn't work hard enough.
No, I didn't. I didn't. But also I didn't know what quite... I knew not of the theatre. I'd just seen 2 plays, well, 1 play twice, Henry VIII. So I simply didn't know what I was aiming for. And I remember we had an old actress called Winifred Oughton, who'd played Hamlet during the war because they were short of men. And she didn't take to me at all. In fact, wrote in my report at the end, I think, of my first term, I would suggest that Diana seeks out some other form of employment, which of course cut my parents to the quick. And it was awful. But other people believed in me. Richard Ainley, for example, he was a teacher there as well, and he believed in me. So I kind of squeaked through.
And when you saw that first term report, were you worried?
Yes, of course. I thought, bang goes my, being entirely Yorkshire and practical, bang goes my my scholarship, bang goes everything. But luckily, I don't think Leeds City Council saw my report.
And actors are often, even when they're at drama school, they're being shaped into classical or character or comedy. But did you have a sense then of where you would go?
I had a sense that, very much so, that I was a leading lady, because in those days the Jews were small, blonde and pretty, and I was none of those things. So forget ever being a Jew. Juliet, forget it. You're going to have to hang about a bit until you play leading lady roles or character roles.
Then you auditioned for the RSC, and it's the sort of equivalent to failing the 11 plus in theatre, I suppose, that you didn't get in. But was that crushing?
No, because they said, go away. And they didn't say no. They said, go away, and we'll take you in a year, get some experience, which sort of kind of echoes what I was saying about being at RADA and not knowing quite. So they said, we'll take you in a year's time.
So you went into what was weekly rep, which isn't available anymore.
No, alas.
Chesterfield and York. Well, you say alas, lots of actors say this because it was the most, frightening because you were doing a different play each week, but the most amazing training.
Oh, it was wonderful. I just adored it. Chesterfield, I was an ASM playing small parts. An
ASM, assistant stage manager. Yeah.
Assistant stage manager. In those days, you did everything. You were sent out to get props. You were on the book. You were everything. You were a very busy person on sort of a pittance a week. And I adored it. I had such fun.
You say one of the tasks of the assistant stage manager was to be on the book or prompt the actors if required. And you are, I think, perhaps the only prompter to have got a review in a newspaper.
I'm not proud of that at all. Yeah, it was the last play of the season, and actors are very experienced at situations where somebody forgets their lines. They help each other out and all that sort of stuff. Well, there I was on the book, the last play of the season, and the company were tired, and they didn't have a chance for a pause, anything. I leapt in with, oh God. And then I got a notice in the local paper and nobody spoke to me again.
I think it was 72 prompts, is that correct?
Oh God, it was something awful. I mean, I didn't think of myself as ambitious at all. I was just trying to be helpful.
The reviewer said the prompter had such a clear and strong voice that
I should have taken a curtain call.
Perhaps have taken a curtain call. Yeah.
Just the shame of it.
You finally joined the RSC, which turned out to be, almost the perfect time to join because it was when it really took off as a company with Peter Hall and others.
Wonderful. It was the last season of Glenn Byam Shaw, and he was going to go out with a bang. So you name it, that star was there. Charles Lawton was playing Bottom, Olivier was playing Coriolanus, Dame Edith Evans was playing Volumnia and the Countess, Sam Wanamaker was there, Albert Finney was there. Amazing.
At this stage, you were thinking of yourself as a classical actress.
Not particularly. I was just grateful to get the job and subsequently to be offered a 3-year contract. Because with that 3-year contract came singing lessons, fencing lessons, verse speaking lessons. It was absolutely wonderful. You know, they threw their arms around you, proved their belief in you by this 3-year contract, and then gave you further space and time to develop.
Patience unmoved. No marvel though she paused. They can be meek that have no other cause. A wretched soul bruised with adversity, we bid be quiet when we hear it cry. But were we burdened with like weight of pain, as much or more we should ourselves complain. So thou that hast no unkind mate to grieve thee, with urging helpless patience would relieve me.
Having become established with the RSC, you did some television roles, and that led to the Avengers. The approach for that come about?
I was just nominated to audition along with half, if not 3/4, of the young actresses in London, yes. And I went along and they said dress, you know, black trousers, black polo neck and everything. And then they put you in the dressing room and they keep you there for half a day while it was just awful. And then, anyway, I did it. And Patrick, I remember, was absolutely charming. Patrick McNee, yeah. And then I got it, I mean, much to my surprise, because I'd sort of thought, well, I'd just go along for the experience, really.
And it was slightly unusual because the Avengers already existed, didn't it? And
yeah.
this was a new role.
Well, it was there'd been two other people. It was a man originally, and then they didn't change the script, which is why she was as accomplished as she was. Oh, it was no. They now pretend they know what they were doing, but they didn't. Absolutely not.
This is really interesting, because, well, you allude to it there, but there are all these articles and books saying that she was a proto-feminist and a strong woman, but the part had been written for a man.
Exactly. Yeah.
And did you have an easy sense of what you were going to do with the role? I mean, did she come easily to you?
Yes. Well, particularly Patrick was very kind, and that mattered, that we clicked, we got on. We had a sort of same sense of humour, and so he was instrumental in my easing myself into that part and very quickly feeling at home in it. Because Pat and I quite often would write our own lines. They were very kind and let us sort of improvise and stuff like, just to keep it fresh.
How'd you fare at the Bureau?
They took me on, but they seemed more interested in my competitors, so I produced one.
Who?
You. We're in the travel business. I provide luxurious igloos in Iceland.
Complete with a deep freeze.
Bearskin rice.
And hot and cold running Eskimos.
Why not? That's quite an idea.
And where do I operate?
From your flat.
Very convenient. But if you want my opinion...
I'd love it, but we have to observe the priorities.
And it's hard now to imagine for a lot of people, younger people, how big what a big TV hit was at that time.
Yeah.
Because there were only 2 channels, weren't there?
Yeah,
so therefore, it was, I mean, if something took off, most of the country was watching it.
It was huge, yes. And also, the fan mail started pouring in. Well, I didn't have a secretary. I didn't have photographs. I didn't have anything. Nobody told me or helped me, except my mum. I used to arrive at my mother's house and, you know, with all these things down. I eventually got photographs and for the first, well, until the end of the series, it was my mother who did the fan mail. So there are hundreds of photographs out there signed by my mother. And she used to answer the mail and, you know, there'd be sort of impassioned young men and my mother would write back and say, what you need is a good run round the block. And my daughter's far too old for you and stuff like that.
On Her Majesty's Secret Service, 1969, again, which feminists have taken offence on your behalf about this, the idea of being a Bond girl. But
oh, that's so silly. Well, there I was. I mean, I didn't ski. I had this very good guy called Willy Bogner doing it for me. But I did drive that car around that rink and loved it. It was great. Poor cameraman was green, as you can imagine, but that was good. I know why I did it. I mean, I knew perfectly well why I'd got the job. George Lazenby was ill-equipped. Didn't know he was a model, male model. So I was there to sort of steer him through and give it some gravitas, which I did.
That's really interesting. So you thought that they had gone for a classical actress alongside a male model?
Yeah. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Just to balance it up.
And it's entered history not entirely for the right reasons, that film, because it was regarded at the time by a lot of people as a disappointment or a disaster.
It's now one of the most successful, if not the most successful Bond movie. I don't say that with any great pride, but it is.
What was the feeling on set about George Lazenby?
He was really difficult. It's not for nothing that they didn't offer him any sequels. I mean, he was just difficult because I think he needed help. Not in the acting. He was really quite good, wasn't he? And attractive and sexy and all those things, but just difficult off stage. He kind of thought he was a film star immediately and started throwing his weight around. And then, of course, it was, accused me of eating garlic before love. It was just so petty and ridiculous. I didn't.
We might as well get that out of the way, because she wrote a newspaper at the time, but it's still printed as fact that you would chew garlic before the love scenes with him.
Garlic and, oh yes, rubbish.
Never did.
No, I mean, I think I had some chicken liver pate in the thing, which had garlic in it, which, silly me, I should have thought of, but I didn't. And I could have easily sprayed or whatever. Poor old George, I don't know what he's doing now, but he's definitely was the architect of his own demise as a film star.
One of the reasons that, as you say, it's taken more and more seriously, that film, is that it is a darker film, that one. I mean, there's serious, dramatic stuff to do with the relationship between Bond and the girl. I mean, it was much less a jokey film.
Yes, and quite why the feminists are up in arms about it, I don't know, because the character that I played had a central role and was not just a piece of fluff.
I'll take that if you don't mind.
You're very sure of yourself, aren't you? Suppose I were to kill you for a thrill.
I can think of something more sociable to do. Let's stop playing games. Who was that man in your room?
You're hurting me.
I thought that was the idea tonight. Now, who was he?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I can be a lot more persuasive, Contessa.
I'm sure you can. Whatever else I may be, I'm not a liar.
Get dressed.
Jumpers, Tom Stoppard play, 1972, which was another very significant role. An unusual role because it involves philosophy, philosophical dialogue, singing. It's a very unusual play. Did it strike you immediately as such?
I loved Dorothy. I just loved her. Married to a really, really intellectual, clever philosopher, and she'd been a blues singer, and she was. Oh, she's so tender and vulnerable, and at the same time she spars with her husband, and it's a wonderful play.
And the National Theatre at this time, where it was, Laurence Olivier was in charge and still around, and you had various dealings with him. Now, all male actors have a Laurence Olivier impersonation, but do you do one?
I don't do a very good one, but I will tell you about. You're not supposed to say the name of the play in a theatre. It's a Scottish play, for those that don't know. I was doing that with Anthony Hopkins, and we did a final run-through for Sir, as he was known as, in the rehearsal room at the Vic. And it was a hot June afternoon, and we did our rehearsal as best we could, ta-da, Sir's out front, and give it some welly. And at the end of it, nobody said anything, which is odd. And so we all kind of, that we sort of felt a bit flat and were wandering away. And Sir leant forward and did this to me. And so I went, and I thought, well, maybe I'm going to get some notes on Lady M, and, good. And he leant forward and he said, "You weren't wearing a brassiere during that run-through, were you, darling?" And I went, "No." And he went, "Very disturbing." And that's all he said about my Lady Macbeth, which is probably all it deserved, but at the time. Anyway, we had not very good notices, and Anthony Hopkins left. One of the critics said of him, he played it like a pork butcher from Abergavenny about to tell the stalls a dirty story, whereupon he had a nervous breakdown and left.
In connection with the not wearing a brassiere in Macbeth, Laurence Olivier had, according to diaries I've read and accounts, he had a nickname for you which feminists certainly wouldn't have approved of.
What was it?
Tits Rigg. He
obviously had a thing about my tits. I didn't know that. Oh, God, that's sweet. Well, you see, I mean, I can't be a feminist because that just makes me laugh. Because, in fact, my tits aren't that big, and I'm certainly not known for cleavage.
Well, they impressed Sir Laurence Olivier.
Yeah,
clearly, yes.
yeah.
After Jumpers, a significant one, but less successful, was your American TV show, Diana.
Yeah,
you were going to be the
much less successful.
It was in that tradition of Mary Tyler Moore and others, where the character had the same name as the actress.
Exactly, that's what doomed it. It was another point of doom for me, because it was a dead ringer for the Mary Tyler Moore show, and Mary Tyler Moore had been there for years and years and years, and was, you know, a national treasure. And then along comes this English woman, copying very much the formula, and I was doomed.
Why did you want to do it then?
I just wanted to experience everything. Comedy, you know, I love comedy. It just makes you feel good.
But it shows how high your stock was in America. That was because of Avengers and On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah, very much so. But I mean, it didn't last long. We closed after so many weeks. And what was so sweet was when I arrived in Hollywood, they sent, you know, the limo. And when I left, they sent the studio wagon.
And was it, you laugh about it now, but was it depressing to be in something? Oh, right.
Not at all. I came back and paid off my mortgage.
The Morecambe Wives show, now this is another of the turning point roles. There isn't really any equivalent now. I mean, to some extent, for a while, Extras was that, which you also appeared in, but there would be this endless speculation about which stars would appear in the Morecambe Wives show and the Christmas show.
Well, to be honest, Glenda's kicked it off. She was the one who started the process of having, you know, star performer to do the play. And good for her, because it gave all of us a huge amount of pleasure to do.
But that was sort of a holiday in a way, was it? That was just fun to do.
Oh, heaven. How could you believe me? Yeah, it's just great. And they were fun to play with as well.
Although they took it pretty seriously, Eric and Annie. I mean, they worked all year on those things.
Absolutely. I mean, no mucking about. But what was so good about it was highly professional, but that it had this icing of fun on top.
Two other very important roles, The Misanthrope and Fedra Britannica, which were both verse translations by Tony Harrison. And Fedra Britannica, it took you literally back to your roots, because he took that play and he set it in the Raj.
Yeah, it didn't work because of that. It simply, also because I was not prepared. I wasn't good. End of story.
I'm interested that you can look back so clearly and say that didn't work. I mean, can you in general do that with your work?
I can tell you which plays I was good in and which plays I wasn't, and why, 9 times out of 10. I mean, you've got to. What's the point? You've got to learn from your mistakes.
OK, well, so tell us some others that didn't work then.
Other things, I did an adaptation of Hedda Gabler for ITV, and that was not very good. It was by John Osborne. And then they cut it down. So it ended up like a French farce, with people coming in and out of the doors and then suddenly, bang, end of play.
You make me afraid, Hedda.
Tea is laid in the dining room, Mum.
Good. We're coming. No, I'd rather go home alone now, straight away. What a way to talk. First, you're going to have some tea, you little mad thing, you. And then at 10 o'clock, Ailot Lovebore will be back. With wine and roses.
I wasn't good in that. I wasn't good in Hay Fever. at the Chichester. I wasn't good in the cherry orchard at Chichester.
Do you know from early on in these cases that...
You're not going to be good?
Yeah.
No. No. You try your best. You do your best. But it's interesting. You can make all sorts of excuses, and I'm not about to go into that. But I do think, in the end, you've got to be honest with yourself, completely and utterly honest, and say, I did not serve that play.
And is it miscasting, or you just can't, as they say, you're not feeling it?
I just wasn't feeling it. I just wasn't there. And I should have been. So, you say sorry to the public.
And how much is it connected with what's going on in the rest of your life? I mean, can you override that? It is.
Quite a lot, yeah. Yes, I wasn't terribly well during hay fever, and my joie de vivre wasn't there.
And the ones where it has worked, or at least it has the public. If we take, for example, Tom Stoppard's Night and Day, it ran for a long time, and you got good notices. With that one, did you think that one had worked?
I knew her. It's the difference. I knew her, and I had absolutely no problem at all. And that's what happens more often than not with me. I can't speak for other people, but you read the script. Sarah Bernhardt said, I look over the part to see if it is in nature, and if it is, then I know it can be played. Isn't that wonderful? Mm. And that's more or less, if it's in my nature, or if it is a nature that I understand, then I can play it.
Follies, Stephen Sondheim, West End, 1987, I think. You had one of the most complicated lyrics, I think, ever written.
Yeah.
Can you remember it still?
No.
I can do it for you, I hope. In the depths of her interior were fears she was inferior, and something even eerier, but no one dared to query her superior exterior.
Yeah.
Which is astonishing bit of lyric writing, even by the standards of Stephen Sondheim. But on the other hand, you had to learn it and sing it.
Yeah, and he actually did write it for me. Mm. And it actually speaks volumes about me. He's a very astute man, Stephen.
Oh, now this is intriguing, because it wasn't in the first version of Follies, as you say, he put it in for you.
Yeah.
And it's this woman who feels...
Ta-da, up front and a bit trembly inside.
Inside, and that's you.
Yeah, a bit.
She also feels she has to put on a show for
very much so.
Other people. Yeah. And you feel that?
Well, not always. As I get older, that kind of drops. But, you know, there is an expectation of you when you've been around as long as I have, that you're going to, there's a sort of degree of, amuse me, entertain me, be the person I thought you would be in my imagination. Do you see what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Then television and theatre, there are a series of, you got into a very nice run, I think, of kind of monster roles of various kinds, of villainesses of various degrees, or at least dark characters. So we have Bleak House, we have Mrs. Danvers and Rebecca, we have Mother Love, which the Andrew Davies adapted from a novel. Those are clearly, I mean, there's something there for an actress to get hold of if you have that degree of darkness.
They're wonderful parts to play. Yes, it's some people find it difficult to get in touch with the darkness. I don't. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe I've got capacity for evil inside me. I don't know. I've never done anything evil, I don't think. But I do understand evil. I understand the desire for evil.
But in Mother Love, I mean, she is a quite satanic figure. This woman has such an obsessive relationship with her son that she tries to control him in every way. But you understood her.
Completely. She disguises everything, but it is of course, it's Oedipal, it's jealousy. And we all understand jealousy, but it's jealousy to such a degree that, of course, it becomes maniacal. And I see how jealousy can build. I see how she does little things and they succeed, and then she does something even greater, and then she contemplates the ultimate, which is killing. The point about playing a character like that is that you have to, it's a bit like Jaws, you have to just see the tail cutting through the water. You can't actually exit the water. You have to keep just things suggested all the way through.
You're like me. We feel very, very deeply. Our love once given is absolute. We know what is right, even when people laugh at it.
I don't think anyone laughs at it, Helena.
You see, I have known betrayal of the worst kind. Kit's father was cruel and unnatural. He behaved like a monster toward Kit and me. And for better or for worse, I have protected my son against that knowledge. Do you understand?
When a role is well known and other people have played it, for example, Mrs. Danvers in Rebecca or Lady Dedlock in Bleak House, do you try to put other people's interpretations out of your mind and just try to start?
Well, I think you've got to. The thing about Mrs. Danvers was that I wanted to show that she was trapped in a juvenile admiration and love for Rebecca. And she'd known Rebecca as a child, and I assumed that Mrs. Danvers was not married because all the housekeepers used to be called Mrs., whether they were married or not. And then I had this hair with a hair clip, which is very schoolgirlish, and that I hope represented what was, and in her heart as well, pathetic and dangerous.
Laurence Olivier famously liked to get the externals right. He said if you got the shoes right and the glasses and the hair. But do you like to do...
I don't work that way normally. It's the first time I've actually done it with Mrs. Danvers, you know, and I thought that'll help. And also, you try and find out the circumstances under which the script was written, you find out about the writer, because all of that feeds into your interpretation. It's not just a play. It's an aspect of humanity at a specific time in history, all of which matters.
You wouldn't think she was dead, would you? I feel her everywhere. So do you, don't you? I hear her footsteps behind me, or the sound of her dress sweeping the stairs as she comes down to dinner. Do you think the dead come back to watch the living? Is she watching us now?
No. I don't know, no.
Does she watch you and Mr. De Winter together?
But when you have a living playwright there, would you ask them a lot, why does she say this, why does she say that?
Oh, yes, very much so. Sometimes they get tetchy.
Go on, tell us who.
No, I wouldn't dream of it. But sometimes the response is, oh, well, of course. Do you see what I mean? I mean, I did Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and the playwright was there.
Edward Albee.
Edward Albee was there. And we did turn to him, and it was quite interesting because David Suchet asked him a lot of questions, and he treated David, I thought, dismissively, and I didn't like that. So I didn't ask questions and went ahead and did my own thing. And then, of course, learnt afterwards that he thoroughly disapproved of my performance. So there you go.
But Albee famously doesn't like to answer questions from actors. He just wants the
but
script
why
to
be
there?
If you're not going to answer questions? Because he's the fount, after all. And I didn't understand that. I mean, surely there has to be a collaboration. And you have to help the actor realize what you have written.
I'm loud, and I'm vulgar, and I wear the pants in this house because somebody's got to, but I'm not a monster. I am not.
You're a spoiled, self-indulgent, willful, dirty-minded, liquor-ridden...
Snap. It went snap. Oh, I'm not going to try to get through to you anymore. I'm not going to try.
And that was part of a run of, I mean, really powerful theatre roles that you got. Medea, Mother Courage, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. at the Almeida, and that went against what a lot of people believe, that the roles get harder to find. But you had really quite a theatrical renaissance with that
I did. I was
run.
very lucky because I came across, well, Jonathan Kent, who saw that I was working in this perfectly dreadful play at the Royal Court, Howard Brenton, I forget what it was called, blessedly.
Oh, it was called Berlin Bertie.
Oh, well, there's a mess of pottage. Anyway, that's another failure. And I couldn't learn from that at all. So I look upon it as dead and buried failure. And then Jonathan saw that I was playing there and thought, oh, she'll play venues other than the West End. And thank God approached me to do All for Love. And then started our collaboration. And courtesy of Jonathan, to whom I owe a very great deal, I played some wonderful parts.
There's a lot of talk about the roles getting much harder to find for women in particular as they get older. I mean, did you find that?
Well, I didn't, courtesy of Jonathan, because he kept on thinking of things for me to do. And so suddenly, at the ripe old age, I think it was around about 50, that I just one thing after the other. And of course, with that, you grow.
You won 3 London Evening Standard Best Actress Awards in the space of, I mean, less than a decade.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. But anyway, it is wonderful, and I was very, very lucky. You know, that you begin to think of yourself as this sort of old hat has been, and that, of course, infuses your work. But I was learning at a time when most learning stops.
But it is famously more difficult for women because whereas men have, say, in Shakespeare, they have that clear set
They've
of roles.
got Lear, yeah.
Lear to come, Prospero, Lear, all of those. There's, I mean, women only really have the Countess in All's Well That Ends Well, don't they? And then they have to look elsewhere, Chekhov. But there just aren't the same number of signature roles.
No.
So you just have to look
Until
elsewhere.
somebody writes something, you know? I saw Life in the Theatre and I thought, oh, that's so interesting.
The David Mamet play?
Yeah, why doesn't he do Life in the Theatre for an actress?
Because that play is about actors, yeah.
Yeah, well, you can do it for an actress. It's very interesting, equally interesting, rather more interesting, in fact, because an actress's emotional life is so imbued with family and lovers and husbands and all that kind of stuff.
And television and movies, even more than theatre, have been accused of ignoring older actresses. But do you feel that?
No. I mean, I don't do much work on television, and I certainly don't do much work on film. But I can't. I'm a very lucky woman. I cannot complain. All the things that matter to me most is theatre. And I have had an absolutely God-given chances in theatre, some of which I've taken, some of which I've failed at, but for the most part, I have absolutely no regrets at all.
Dame Diana Rigg, thank you very much.
Thank you.